Grace Taylor had never asked to become a symbol. She just wanted to dance. At 16, she'd spent years perfecting her form in front of bedroom mirrors and cracked gym floors. High kicks, flawless landings, synchronized timing. But none of that mattered the moment she stepped into Westbrook High's cheer tryouts. The moment she smiled, they stopped smiling. To them, she wasn't a talented girl with a hopeful heart. She was a disruption. A black face in a white tradition. The football team whispered. The cheerleaders stared. And somewhere behind the bleachers, 3 boys decided she didn't belong. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The school's trophy case gleamed with a history written by others. Photo after photo of smiling blondes in red and gold uniforms, cheerleading captains framed like royalty. Westbrook High wasn't just a school, it was a small-town institution. Families had lived there for generations. Change in all its forms was not welcome. And Grace was change in motion. Her name was called on the final roster like a challenge to the old order, Grace Taylor. The room fell silent. Then came the murmurs. Someone clapped, but it felt like obligation. A few girls hugged her, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. In the corner, the football captain, Chase Walker, stared her down like she'd just stolen something that wasn't hers. That night, the whispers turned to words. Affirmative action. She's not even from here. Coach just wanted to look woke. Grace kept her chin up. She'd been warned this could happen. Her father, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Taylor, had served 3 tours overseas and fought for this country in ways most Americans could never imagine. He taught her how to read people, not their words, but their intentions. And Westbrook High, with its polished front and rotting core, was already screaming its message loud and clear. You don't belong here. The first week passed in tense silence. Grace practiced harder than anyone. She knew the routines by heart, and her form was flawless. But each smile from a teammate felt forced. Each joke had a punchline she wasn't part of. When she walked into the cafeteria, conversation stopped. And then came the boys. Chase Walker, the Golden Boy quarterback, family money, full scholarship prospects, the kind of kid people called All-American without irony. Dylan Brooks, linebacker and school enforcer. Less charm, more muscle, a boiling pot of barely contained anger. Evan Miller, the tag-along, desperate to belong, echoing their cruelty like a loyal echo. They didn't attack all at once. No, boys like that knew how to destroy slowly. It started with comments in the hallway, the kind you could play off as jokes if anyone ever asked. Then came the bumped shoulders, the accidental spills. One day, Grace found her locker ajar, books rearranged, nothing stolen, just touched. Touched without permission. It felt like a warning. The next, her name appeared on a fake Instagram account, circled in red with captions like, "Not my cheerleader" and "Westbrook's going woke." She didn't flinch, not yet. But when Dylan accidentally shoved her in the cafeteria and her tray hit the floor, people laughed. Not loudly, not all at once. But they laughed. She walked past them, shoulders square, and pretended her heart wasn't pounding like a war drum. What they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was the woman behind the silence. Grace had grown up on military bases. Her bedtime stories were tactical briefings. Her first lesson in self-defense came at 9 years old with a rubber knife and a wooden dummy. Her father didn't raise a victim. He raised a survivor. But even survivors bleed. And as the weeks wore on, as the harassment escalated and the school turned its face away, even Grace began to wonder, How much longer could she hold the line? Because something was building, something dark. And when it came, it wouldn't be a joke. It wouldn't be a push in the hallway or a stolen pair of cheer shoes. It would be a message. And Grace Taylor would have a choice: run or fight. She'd been trained for the battlefield, but no one ever told her the real war would start in a high school hallway. For the first few days, Grace Taylor kept her head down, not in fear, but in control. That's what her father had taught her. Don't give the enemy the satisfaction of seeing you flinch. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Make them underestimate you. It worked, for a while, but Westbrook High wasn't just a school, it was a machine. And when one cog didn't look like the others, the gears began to grind. Grace noticed it first in the locker room. Whispers when she entered. Silence when she dressed. The other girls clung to their circles like lifelines. A few, like Madison Reed, offered polite smiles and short conversation, but most simply avoided eye contact. On Monday morning, Grace opened her locker and froze. Her textbooks weren't missing, just shuffled. Her perfectly organized folders were now bent out of order, a granola bar wrapper crushed between pages. Her padlock hung loosely, unlatched, as if someone had twisted the dial until it popped open. Not vandalism, exactly, just intrusion. A quiet invasion. 3 lockers down, Chase Walker leaned against the wall, talking to a sophomore girl. His voice was low and charming, but his eyes kept flicking toward her, watching, measuring, daring her to react. Grace shut the locker without a word. At cheer practice that afternoon, she worked twice as hard, her movements sharp, efficient, like blades slicing through air. But Brittany Vaughn, a junior with pageant curls and a perfect tan, kept stepping back into Grace's space during formations, once accidentally elbowing her during a turn. "Sorry," Brittany whispered, flashing a too-sweet smile. Still learning the spacing. By Wednesday, a post surfaced on Instagram, a screenshot of the official cheer roster with Grace's name circled in red. The caption read, "Guess Westbrook's going woke. R.I.P. real Eagle pride." Comments trickled in. "Diversity hire much? There goes the neighborhood." The account was anonymous, created just for the post. Grace screenshotted it all. She didn't cry, she didn't confront anyone. She logged it, date and time, and sent it to a secure folder on her phone labeled Evidence. When she got home, her father was already at the kitchen table, nursing black coffee and reading mission reports from his time in Iraq. The moment he saw her face, he knew. "They're pushing your boundaries," Marcus Taylor said, trying to see where the wall cracks. "What do I do?" He set his coffee down. "You hold the line, and you take notes." That Friday, Grace sat at her usual table in the cafeteria. Honor Society kids, mostly quiet overachievers. They talked about scholarships and AP tests. She tried to join in, laughing when she could, chewing slowly to cover the growing nausea in her stomach. That's when Dylan Brooks passed behind her, shoulder-checking her chair hard enough to jostle her food tray. "Oops," he muttered, never looking back. Jessica, her closest friend at the table, frowned. "That was on purpose." "Maybe he's just having a bad day," Grace replied softly, already cataloging the moment. That afternoon, her father sent her a short text. "Dinner at 7. You good?" She typed, "Yeah, just cheer stuff." Then deleted it. Typed again, "All good. See you at 7. But she wasn't good, not even close. The real message came during 7th period. Someone had tagged her in a new post, a photoshopped image of the school's cheer flyer. Grace's face enlarged, her skin darkened unnaturally, with the caption, "Not my cheerleader. Affirmative action fail." It had over 40 likes in 20 minutes. Her hands trembled as she took screenshots, blocked the account, and silently placed her phone face down on her desk. Coach Reynolds, the football coach, stood chatting with Principal Green just outside the classroom door. Both had seen the post. Grace could tell by the way Reynolds kept glancing at her with barely veiled amusement. When she reported it to the office, Green sighed. "Grace, social media is tricky. We can't control what students post outside school hours. But it's about me. It's racially targeted. We can investigate, but these things usually blow over. My advice? Keep a low profile for now." "A low profile?" she repeated, stunned. "Look, no one wants to see you hurt, but sometimes it's better to ride out the storm." Grace left the office more resolved than ever. She wouldn't ride out anything. That night, her father saw the screenshots, the bruises, the way her voice caught when she described how the team had started excluding her from group chats, forgetting to tell her about last-minute practice changes. Marcus Taylor sat silent for a long time. Then he opened the hall closet, pulled out a small wooden box, and set it on the table. Inside, old field notes, a stopwatch, laminated tactical cards, and a brand-new notebook. You start tracking everything. Times, names, places, like a field op. If they escalate, they already did, she said. He looked up slowly. Then we escalate too, strategically. From that day forward, Grace became more than a cheerleader. She became an observer, a silent shadow. She noted Chase's locker combo, Dylan's girlfriend, Evan's class schedule. She marked who spoke to whom at lunch, who dropped notes into whose locker. She memorized their routes between classes, their patterns, their weak points. Her father taught her how to use her phone camera subtly, how to angle mirrors to reflect conversations, how to plant questions in casual conversation that might yield useful intel. They were building a case, not just to expose the bullies, but to prepare for what was coming. Because both of them knew this wasn't the worst of it. Not yet. The real turning point came on game day. The homecoming crowd filled the bleachers in red and gold. Grace was finally moved to the second row of the cheer lineup, still not front and center, but a visible step forward. Her uniform was freshly pressed, her braids tied back with ribbons. She had even allowed herself a small smile. Then it happened. She was walking toward the gymnasium when she heard footsteps behind her. "Hey, new girl," Chase called. She turned, too late. Dylan grabbed her left arm. Evan blocked the parking lot view. "What are you doing?" she demanded, trying to twist away. "Teaching you your place," Chase said. Then, with coordinated force, they shoved her backward. She hit the puddle hard. Mud soaked her uniform. Concrete scraped her skin. Her cheer skirt tore along the side. Laughter erupted behind her. Someone filmed it. Madison ran forward, voice full of panic. "Grace, oh my God, are you okay?" She was, physically, but something inside her cracked, not in defeat, in resolve. As she sat in the mud, the laughter echoing behind her like cannon fire, she thought only one thing. This ends now. Grace Taylor sat in the mud for several seconds, not because she couldn't get up, but because she needed to memorize the moment. The feel of wet earth clinging to her uniform. The taste of humiliation on her tongue. The sound of Chase Walker's smug laughter behind her. It wasn't just a puddle, it was a message, a public declaration from 3 boys who believed they owned Westbrook High. And by shoving her, by ripping her skirt, by laughing at her like she was nothing, they had drawn a line. And for the first time, Grace was ready to cross it. Madison helped her to her feet, whispering apologies and something about going to the principal. But Grace wasn't listening, not really. Her eyes tracked the football players walking away, high-fiving each other like they'd just scored a touchdown. "Nice uniform," Dylan Brooks called over his shoulder. "Really brings out your eyes." Chase added, "Maybe now you'll think twice about where you belong." That night, Grace didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even clean the mud from her torn uniform. She walked into her house, still damp and scraped and shaking, and found her father at the kitchen counter sipping coffee, reading the Wall Street Journal like it was any other Friday. He looked up, paused, then set down the cup with the kind of deliberate stillness Grace had learned to fear. "What happened?" he asked, voice even but full of warning. And this time, she told him everything: the locker, the Instagram posts, the accidental shoves and silent hostility, and today, the public attack. She didn't dramatize, she didn't embellish. She laid it out like a report. When she was done, there was a silence so thick it seemed to muffle the air itself. Commander Marcus Taylor had faced insurgents, warlords, and trained combatants in faraway countries. But in that moment, his daughter's pain, cold, methodical, buried beneath weeks of control, hit harder than any battlefield wound. "Show me the posts," he said, voice low. She did. He read each one, every comment, every image. "This isn't bullying," he said. "It's a coordinated campaign. These boys aren't just cruel, they're strategic, and they think they're above consequence." "They are," Grace replied. "Their families are donors. One of their dads sits on the school board." "Well, then," Marcus said, standing, "it's time we level the playing field." The next morning, their kitchen became a war room. Out came notebooks, printed schedules, maps of the school's layout, photos of students from the yearbook, and transcripts of social media posts. Grace had already started tracking everything. Marcus just showed her how to refine it, how to think tactically like a soldier. "Chase is the leader," she noted. "Football captain, rich family, thinks he's invincible." "Perfect," her father said. "What's his weakness?" "His reputation. College scouts are watching him. His image is everything." "Exactly. He'll protect it at all costs. Dylan's the muscle. Not as smart, more dangerous when provoked. And Evan just follows." "Then Evan will crack first," Marcus said. "He always does." They laid out a timeline, a strategy. Step 1, observe. Step 2, gather leverage. Step 3, turn the table. "But we don't strike yet," Marcus warned. "Let them feel confident, let them slip up." That weekend, Grace began surveillance. She arrived at school early Monday morning, sitting in the library with a clear view of the parking lot. She watched as Chase arrived at 7:48 a.m. sharp. Same black truck, same spot near the gym. Dylan came 3 minutes later in his loud pickup. Evan was dropped off by his mom, always looking down at his phone, always trailing the other two like a nervous shadow. She noted where they sat at lunch, who they texted during breaks. She planted her phone to record conversations from a distance. She used reflective surfaces to watch without being seen. By Thursday, she had 28 pages of notes. On Friday, she caught Chase slipping a vape pen to a sophomore near the locker rooms. She didn't say a word, just filmed it. That night, she and her father sat side by side reviewing the footage. "You're not just fighting back," Marcus told her. "You're building a case, brick by brick." But Chase and his crew weren't done. After a full week of silence, they took it up a notch. One evening, as Grace walked home from school, she felt a shadow behind her. Then she heard it, a truck engine slowing. Her pulse spiked. She glanced at a parked car's window and saw them, Chase, Dylan, and Evan, crawling along the curb in Chase's black Dodge. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Never let the enemy choose the ground. Force them onto yours." She quickened her pace, heading toward a well-lit intersection. But it was too late. The truck doors slammed. "Hey, Grace." Chase's voice cut through the quiet suburban street. "We just want to talk." She spun around to find herself cornered. Dylan to her left, Evan behind, Chase closing in. "We know what you've been doing," Dylan snarled. "Setting us up, spying." Grace stood her ground. "You set yourselves up," she replied evenly. "I just watched." Evan looked nervous. "Just tell us what you want. You want us off the team? You want an apology?" "I want you to understand," she said, "that you don't get to touch people and walk away like it's nothing." "That it?" Chase hissed. "You gonna cry now? Run home to Daddy?" "No," Grace said, voice steady. "I'm going to end this." And then, like a switch flipping, they lunged. Dylan came first, big and fast, but Grace stepped aside, pivoted, and delivered a sharp elbow to his ribs that dropped him to one knee. Evan reached for her, and she twisted his wrist, sending him sprawling onto the grass. Chase, furious, pulled something from his jacket, a folding knife. "You want to fight?" he shouted. "Let's see what that SEAL training's worth." Grace's heart pounded, but her hands didn't shake. As he charged, she sidestepped, grabbed his wrist and redirected the blade. A twist, just like her father taught her, and the knife hit the pavement. She struck him once, clean and fast, a knee to the gut, followed by an uppercut that left him dazed and stumbling backward. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the cops. Evan tried to run. Dylan groaned, still on the ground. Chase looked up, dazed and bloodied. "You're going to pay for this," he muttered. "No," Grace replied, breathing hard. "You already did." When the police arrived, flashlights cut across the street. Officers found Grace standing calmly in the middle of the sidewalk. Knife on the pavement. 3 teenage boys in various stages of collapse. Chase shouted, "She jumped us." Evan cried, "It was supposed to be a talk." But the evidence, plus a neighbor's doorbell camera, told a different story. Grace told her side clearly and calmly, with names, dates, and screen captures to back it up. She was taken to the station for questioning. So were the boys. By the next morning, everything had changed. Chase Walker was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. Dylan Brooks was charged with attempted battery. Evan Miller, the weakest of the trio, was charged with conspiracy and released to his mother's custody. And Grace? She walked back into school on Monday, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a fighter. A girl who had endured everything they threw at her and stood. For 2 weeks after the incident on the sidewalk, Westbrook High buzzed with more whispers than cheers. The school had never seen anything like it. 3 football stars detained, one of them caught with a weapon, and the girl they had bullied standing calmly while police cuffed them one by one. The official story, of course, twisted in every direction. Some claimed Grace had set a trap. Others said the boys had simply gone too far. A few, very few, called it what it was: a racially charged assault stopped by a girl who knew how to fight back. But if Chase, Dylan, and Evan were shaken by their arrest, they didn't show it. In fact, their rage festered like infection under the skin. Because in their minds, they were the real victims, and they weren't done. The trio had been released under strict conditions. No contact with Grace, no unsupervised school activities, and no access to team practices. But it didn't matter. Their plan had already begun. It started with Evan. Evan Miller hadn't been to school in days, but late one night his name lit up Marcus Taylor's security system. Grace's father had installed extra surveillance after the first incident. Motion detectors, cameras with night vision, floodlights that responded to movement. He wasn't taking chances. At 12:41 a.m., one of the driveway cameras picked up a shadow creeping toward their mailbox. A figure in a hoodie glancing around, holding something. Marcus reviewed the footage in the morning and found it. A dead bird placed inside the mailbox, wrapped in Grace's torn cheer ribbon. No note, no message. Message received. Grace didn't flinch. Instead, she doubled down on her preparation. She began martial arts drills at 6 a.m., under her father's watchful eye. They rehearsed situational awareness, disarmament, pressure points. Each move repeated until it became muscle memory. Each threat visualized and neutralized. But no amount of training could prepare her for what came next. On a cold Thursday night, after a mandatory school board meeting where parents debated whether Chase and his friends should be expelled, Grace walked to her car in the nearly empty lot behind the gym. She had been careful. Head on a swivel, keys between her fingers, phone in hand. But as she reached her car, she saw the windshield had been cracked, smashed clean through, with a rock still lying on the hood. Painted across the driver's side door in bright red spray paint were the words, "Go back." She froze. Then she heard the footsteps, heavy, fast, from two directions. Before she could react, a hood slipped over her head, arms wrapped around her, pulling her back. Another hand grabbed her phone and flung it to the ground. "Now, we're gonna finish this," a voice growled. Chase. They dragged her behind the dumpsters by the athletic fields. It was dark, cold, and reeking of garbage. A place no cameras could see, a place chosen carefully. The hood came off. Dylan loomed over her, fists clenched, face wild with fury. Evan stood behind, eyes darting, visibly shaking. But he didn't run. "Still think you're smarter than us?" Chase hissed. "Still think you can ruin people's lives and just walk away?" Grace didn't answer. "You know what people think now?" Dylan snapped. "That you beat us, that we're weak, you embarrassed us." "You embarrassed yourselves," Grace said calmly, blood already rising in her ears. Wrong answer. Dylan raised a hand, but Chase held him back. "Not yet." He knelt in front of her, just close enough for her to smell the alcohol on his breath. "You think you won, but we're not done. You're going to leave this school. You're going to disappear, or we make sure next time nobody finds you in time." He stood. "Teach her what it feels like." Dylan stepped forward. That's when she moved. One step forward, a feint, then a pivot. She ducked under his swing, drove her elbow into his ribs, then brought her knee up into his stomach with brutal precision. He dropped, gasping. Evan grabbed her arm, but she twisted free, slamming her palm into his shoulder to knock him off balance. He hit the concrete, groaning. Chase rushed her, but Grace was ready. She remembered her father's words. "You don't fight fair. You fight smart. End it before it starts." She sidestepped his tackle, swept his leg, and sent him crashing into a pile of broken pallets. He reached for something, a metal pipe, and swung. It grazed her arm, pain shot through her, white and sharp. But she stayed on her feet. She ducked the second swing, closed the distance, and landed a punch straight to his jaw that sent him backward. The pipe clattered to the ground. He was stunned, bleeding. Dylan was crawling. Evan was crying. And Grace was standing. Then came the blue and red lights. Someone had called the cops. Maybe a janitor, maybe a teacher still on campus. Either way, the parking lot lit up like a crime scene. Officers poured in, guns drawn. "Hands in the air!" one of them shouted. Grace raised her arms, heart pounding. "I was attacked," she said. "There are witnesses. I defended myself." The boys were detained on the spot. Evan tried to run, but slipped on the frozen ground. Chase refused to speak, lips tight, blood on his shirt. Dylan wouldn't even look at anyone. They were cuffed and taken away. Grace, shaking but unbroken, sat on the curb until her father arrived. Marcus didn't say a word. He just wrapped his jacket around her shoulders and held her while the paramedics cleaned the cuts on her arm. "I'm okay," she said. "No," he whispered. "You're not. But you will be." The next day, Westbrook High turned upside down. The story had leaked again. Local news stations ran headlines like, "High school ambush thwarted by cheerleader," "Football stars arrested in after-hours attack," "Student targeted in hate crime speaks out." The district suspended Chase, Dylan, and Evan indefinitely. The police filed felony charges: assault, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping. The FBI got involved when the hate crime allegations became unavoidable. The video footage from a nearby maintenance camera, grainy but clear, showed 3 boys dragging a girl behind the dumpsters. Grace's injuries matched the timeline. Her past reports suddenly became evidence, not overreactions. At the emergency school board meeting that week, dozens of parents stood to speak. Some defended the boys. "Teenagers make mistakes," one mother said, her voice cracking. "Their lives are being destroyed." But others had heard enough. "My daughter walks these halls," said another. "And if we let this slide, we're telling every black student, every girl, that they're on their own." By the end of the night, the board voted unanimously: permanent expulsion. The DA filed to try Chase as an adult. Dylan and Evan's cases were referred to juvenile court. Grace was given a personal liaison for student safety. And Marcus Taylor? He filed a formal civil suit against the school for negligence and failure to act on racial harassment reports. That weekend, Grace sat quietly in the basement with her father. The punching bags were still swaying from their earlier drills. Her hands were bruised, but steady. "They're gone now," she said softly. "Yes, but it doesn't feel like a victory." "It's not supposed to," he replied. "Justice isn't about how it feels. It's about what it stops from happening again." Grace nodded, because that's what this was really about. Not revenge, not a fight in the dark, but putting an end to a war she never asked for. A war she had won. With discipline, strategy, and courage. And now, at last, the reckoning was complete. The courtroom was silent as the final gavel fell. Chase Walker, Dylan Brooks, and Evan Miller, once untouchable stars of Westbrook High, were led away in handcuffs, their futures shattered not by one mistake, but by a pattern of cruelty, entitlement, and hate. Across the aisle, Grace Taylor sat still, her posture composed, but her eyes reflecting something deeper, not victory, but clarity. For months, she had been their target. Because of her skin, because of her presence, because she dared to stand in a space they believed belonged to them. But they'd made one fatal miscalculation. They mistook silence for submission. Grace had never been weak. She had been strategic. Every shove, every slur, every whisper behind her back had been met not with tears, but with documentation, with evidence, with restraint. She had turned her pain into a plan, and when the system failed to protect her, she became her own line of defense. The impact rippled far beyond a courtroom. Westbrook High, once a school blind to its own rot, was forced to look inward. The principal resigned. The athletic department was placed under review. New anti-harassment policies were passed, and the school board began implementing mandatory diversity and civil rights training. Grace didn't just protect herself. She changed the rules of the game. The national spotlight followed. Interviews, articles, messages from strangers who had once felt just as isolated, just as invisible. Her courage had made them feel seen. And yet, when asked how she felt, Grace said simply, "I did what I had to do. For me. And for the next girl who walks into that locker room and gets the same stares I did." Not everyone changed. Some parents grumbled that the punishments were too harsh. Some students still whispered in corners, but the fear was gone. Grace had taken back what they tried to steal: her voice, her dignity, her place in the world, and she had done it without stooping to hate. In the final week of senior year, she stood at the podium in front of her graduating class. She wore her cap and gown over a scarred shoulder, evidence of a fight fought and won. She looked into the crowd, students, parents, faculty, and said, "Sometimes the greatest battles don't happen on battlefields. They happen in classrooms, hallways, cafeterias, and sometimes the loudest weapon is your silence, held until it matters most. Don't be afraid to speak, but more importantly, don't be afraid to act." She left the stage to a standing ovation, not because they pitied her, but because they finally understood her. Grace Taylor didn't just survive Westbrook High, she rewrote its legacy. What would you do if someone tried to take your voice, your place, or your dignity? Have you ever stood up to a bully, or wished you had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone you know, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because we've got more powerful stories coming your way. Let's keep talking, keep learning, and keep standing up for justice, for courage, and for each other.